The property subject to joint tenancy ownership does not need to go through probate, since full ownership rights are transferred as a result of the joint tenancy. Any contradicting terms contained in the will regarding the property are irrelevant. Joint tenancy rights for both spouses trump the will and the probate court. Intestate succession. An individual who dies without a will is said to die intestate. Properties which transfer as a result of intestate succession is said to transfer by descent. If a person dies intestate, their assets will be distributed to the person's heirs according to state law. Many states have adopted the Uniform Probate Code, which contains rules regarding how an intestate individual's assets are distributed. Intestate succession can become very complicated depending on the heirs of the deceased. We will review some generic intestate succession rules as an illustration of the process. Intestate succession rules consist of a series of questions. The first question in our succession rules is whether or not a spouse survives the deceased. If a spouse survives the deceased, and all the children of the deceased are also children of the spouse, the entire estate goes to the spouse. If the deceased has children which are not also children of the surviving spouse, the first $50,000 of the estate and then 50% of the estate goes to the spouse. The remainder of the estate is divided between the children of the deceased spouse who are not children of the surviving spouse. If there are no heirs, the entire estate or all the possessions, both real and personal, of the deceased become property of the state. The property is said to escheat the state. The probate court is responsible for determining the heirs to an estate in the case of intestate succession. In the case of testate succession, the court determines the validity of the will. In either case, the court will appoint an executor over the estate. The executor is the individual responsible for overseeing the distribution of the estate. If assets need to be appraised or sold, the executor takes care of the details. The executor also ensures applicable estate taxes are paid and that all assets are distributed according to the will or the state's law of descent. Involuntary alienation. As the title of this section implies, we will now discuss how property is transferred without consent of the owner of the property. We already mentioned escheat, which is when the estate takes the property of a deceased individual who died without a will or heirs. Escheat is considered involuntary alienation. We will cover three other types of involuntary alienation as follows: adverse possession, eminent domain, and lien foreclosure. Our discussion of lien foreclosure will be brief as we cover the topic extensively in other courses. Adverse possession. If an owner fails to use their property for an extended period of time, they run the risk of losing it to an adverse possessor. Adverse possession laws allow an individual to gain title to real property by adversely possessing it for a certain period of time. Adverse possession is a process which is dictated by state law. 5 general requirements are consistent along all jurisdictions. If one wishes to claim ownership to a piece of real property, they must file an action in court asking that ownership to the property be awarded to the adverse possessor. The person claiming adverse possession must be prepared to show evidence of compliance with the requirements for adverse possession. Let's review an example. The Jones family lives in a home adjacent to a vacant lot. The Jones family does not know who owns the lot, and the lot is never used. The Jones family decide to use the lot to keep their horses and their horse trailer. The Jones put up a fence and commence using the vacant lot. The Jones continue this use for 10 years, when the true owner decides to build a home on the property and demands that the Jones remove the horses, fence, and the horse trailer. What rights do the Jones have regarding to the vacant lot?